Local people have come together in a nonpartisan way to protect the Constitution. They formed an Olympia-based organization, the Citizens Movement, to impeach Bush and Cheney. We have three people from that group who are here in the TCTV studio to explain what this is, what it means, how it works, and to share their information and insights with us. All three have strong backgrounds in a variety of different public policy issues, and they've come together with a number of other local people to work on this. So I'm happy to welcome George Hartwell, Talitha Thalia, and Jerry Smith. Good to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
We should start by just clarifying what impeachment is, because I think a lot of people don't have a clear sense of what it is. Jerry, could you give us just a little bit of overview?
Right. From my understanding, impeachment is the investigation of the actions of the president and vice president, and it's initiated by the House of Representatives. And if they feel that in those investigations they turn up enough evidence, then that's forwarded to the Senate, and the Senate has to either convict or not convict.
And the charges that the House could bring are called articles of impeachment. That's right. The term that people may be hearing sometimes. And then it needs a 2/3 vote in the Senate. That was my recollection.
Okay.
And that would, in effect, then remove the president or vice president from office. There's some misunderstandings I think that people have. Can we share what confusing points people have had, or questions or concerns? Or
Well, I imagine one of the issues on which people tend to be confused is that they think of impeachment as an automatic removal of the president, whereas it really is. It's like an indictment, except it's not a criminal indictment. It's an accusation that the president has failed in some major way to conduct his office appropriately, that he's violated the Constitution, and that's what's intended by the term high crimes and misdemeanors. It doesn't necessarily mean that the president has committed a crime in the criminal sense. It means that he's failed to uphold the oath of office in some serious major way.
Okay, and so so the impeachment can be moving along, and there's that second step that Jerry mentioned, but when the House does the impeachment, that doesn't necessarily remove him yet.
That's right. The Senate has to make that decision.
And I think some people are looking at this as if it were like a partisan thing, and your experience has been that it's not, as you're connecting with people.
And the most important thing is that it's nonpartisan. It's about the Constitution, that we all stand together, and that our representatives took an oath, and that everyone from both sides should take a stand on an issue when the laws have been violated.
Okay, so people can come together around the issues and the principles involved, and not make it a partisan thing at all.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
When I was talking with each of you on the phone to prepare for the program, all of you emphasized that this really is about the Constitution, and we're saying that here. And you've linked this when we talked. You also mentioned the oath of office thing. Tell us some more about your thinking.
Well, my thinking is that the people who are in our Congress take an oath that says to uphold the Constitution. And to me, that means it shouldn't be a political choice as to whether or not they go for impeachment or not, but they should set politics aside and say, the president has overstepped his bounds, and therefore the impeachment should be occurring, or at least investigated.
One of the things I like about it, and I've heard some other people mention, is that it's actually a nonviolent solution. In other countries, when you have somebody who's done outrageous things, there's a coup, some violent coup, and they overthrow the government and all that stuff. And this is actually a nonviolent solution because we've got a system built into the Constitution that lets people correct a problem without having to resort to a bloody coup like they might do in some other nations. I have a short quotation from former Congresswoman Elizabeth Holtzman, who was very active. She was in Congress at the time of the Nixon impeachment, and she wrote just very recently, "Impeachment is an essential tool for preserving democracy. The framers of our Constitution, determined to provide protections against grave abuses of power by a president, created the impeachment process as a special procedure for citizens. Through their representatives, citizens would be able to remove a president run amok. And so she was there, 30-some years ago when Nixon was doing that, and she's very actively working on this now. It was good to hear from her. The oath of office you mentioned talks about faithfully execute the office of President of the United States, to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And I think all three of you will be talking about the laws and some of these other aspects. There are a lot of reasons that I've been hearing and reading about for why the president and vice president currently in office should be impeached. And I know that the group that you're with is focused on 4 main issues. Could we do like a brief overview of those 4 issues now, and then we'll spend some time on each of them? So
Sure.
who could give us the overview?
Sure. The 4 issues that our organization has selected to focus on are the invasion of Iraq, which is an illegal invasion in our view.
Because it was based on lies
based
and
on
deception,
false information,
fraud,
on
basically.
manipulation, and actually information that we now understand was false. So
That they knew to be false too.
that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
So in a sense, we were put into this war on a fraudulent basis.
Okay.
The president and vice president have committed fraud on the people of the United States.
Okay.
Secondly, there's the issue of torture and rendition, the taking of so-called enemy combatants and housing them in prisons offshore and without the right of due process. That's a violation of the Constitution, of the Bill of Rights. Thirdly is the issue of signing statements, wherein the president receives information from Congress that a law has been passed, and he declares that he's not going to follow some portion or perhaps all of the law. And fourth, slips my mind at the moment, what's number 4?
Spying on citizens
spying.
without warrants.
Spying, warrantless wiretapping, right.
Okay.
Right.
And that violates several laws as well. And I've seen lists that include a number of other things as well, but you felt that these 4 presented the most solid case. So let's talk about each of these. The basic information about lying to start the war in Iraq. You can tell us some more about that.
Really, when you look at the information that we now know, it becomes very obvious that the country was lied to get us into this invasion. Let me just take an example. I think it was 2002, a year prior to the invasion, former Ambassador Joe Wilson was sent to Africa to investigate the claim that Iraq was collecting uranium in order to make an atomic weapon. Well, he investigated, discovered that the charges were false and were the result of forgeries, returned with that information, turned it over to the CIA, who had hired him to do this investigation. And the Bush administration dismissed that information and went ahead with, in the President's 2003 State of the Union address, claiming that he knew that the Iraqis were preparing a nuclear weapon. So there's that issue, and there are many more issues.
Yeah. Some of these things surfaced in Britain. There's a governmental office on Downing Street.
That's correct.
And there's what's been referred to as the Downing Street memo. And could one of you tell us about that?
Downing Street memo was actually a memo that came out of a meeting that occurred in July 2002 between top British intelligence officials and American intelligence officials in Washington, D.C. I think the person's name was Dearlove, or Inspector Dearlove. He was equivalent to the top of our top CIA official. And he reported when he returned to Great Britain that the Bush administration had already intended, had planned to invade Iraq and was fixing the intelligence to support that plan.
Yeah. That was their quote, fixing the intelligence around the policy.
That's right.
Something like that, yeah. So clearly deceptive.
And that's never been refuted. That's a
right. Are there other points along this line of that first impeachable offense that you folks are working with?
I think that it's just as time goes on, we see more and more things that we were lied to about and misled. Like Colin Powell, after he resigned, talked about the statement of the WMDs and how he'd left that in his speech, and it was a shameful thing that he had done.
Yeah, even though he knew better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then all those accusations that Al-Qaeda was behind, or that the Iraqis were behind Al-Qaeda's actions and 9/11 and all that stuff. And they kept linking those two even though they knew there was no connection. And
they went to great effort to link the two.
They
yes.
did. It was all deception, and I think you used the term fraud a moment ago in talking about this. There was, I ran across something in my research for the program that says that from time to time the federal government conducts what they call national intelligence estimates. And in December of 2001, which was over a year before the Bush started the war, the national intelligence estimate that was in effect at that time said very clearly that Iraq did not have nuclear weapons and was not trying to get them at that time. And there's a process in developing these national intelligence estimates that allows other intelligence professionals to enter dissenting opinions so that there's a complete record of this. And there were no dissenting opinions, so it was like unanimous among the intelligence professionals that was the case, that Iraq was not trying to get nuclear weapons. And the Bush people knew that, and they kept on saying that even though their own best intelligence data said that it's absolutely not true.
That's right.
And it just goes on and on.
That what's really important about this issue regarding Iraq is that we have now been involved in this invasion occupation for longer than we were in the Second World War. It has cost us, it's costing roughly $4 billion a month to prosecute the war. We've lost nearly 3,000 Americans killed and perhaps 25,000 to 30,000 seriously maimed American servicemen and women. And by some estimates, as many as 500,000 Iraqis killed. So the government sent us into an illegal war on false pretenses, and we're still to this day dealing with that decision.
And they haven't, after all that time, after all these 3+ years, nearly 4 years now, still have not even secured the road between the airport and the capital.
It's a civil war.
So the second impeachable offense that your group is working with has to do with torturing and abusing prisoners, taking away their civil liberties. Could one of you give us some information on that?
Yeah, this one, I think the torture end is the one that concerns me as glaring. I mean, obviously we have Abu Ghraib and we have Guantanamo, and then we have these secret black prisons around Europe, and all this is carried out clandestinely, and then the definition of torture seems to be a word game. And I suspect that, if our president were on the other end of torture, the word game wouldn't apply, whether or not you're drowning them or waterboarding them or what's legal and what isn't legal. We also have Captain James Yee, who lives here in Olympia, that was picked up and hauled away and put in solitary confinement for 76 days, was it? And then was released with no charges, and he didn't know why.
It turned out they had no case at all, but they kept trying to find some way to save face and make him look bad.
And the one that shocks me the most is this Canadian that got picked up at JFK Airport, and they took him off the plane and rendered him, which is, I thought that was a term you used when you took a pig to the factory and boiled him down.
Yeah.
And they sent him to Syria, and he talked about being in a prison cell that was about the size of a grave, and I don't remember how long he was there. Now he's back out. He's been found, he did nothing wrong. He's back in Canada. I think, in fact, the Canadians have passed legislation that absolutely declares that he did absolutely nothing wrong. And yet I don't think we'd let him back in the U.S. now.
One of the things that's perplexing about this is that you'll hear people in high levels of government say that we're out here doing these wars to promote democracy and freedom and so forth. And the whole world knows that it's the official U.S. policy to torture people and to commit these really gross human rights appearances. And you have to just wonder what world opinion, how they're processing this when we say, oh, we're for freedom and democracy and all the good stuff, because they know, the rest of the world knows that we're doing those things. And it's like, it just,
Yeah.
it's just,
Well, yeah, the aftermath of these policies has been that, and I think we all know now that the United States has lost a great deal of face in the world as a result of this behavior.
and it's not just that moral or ethical sense, but what the kinds of things that you're describing actually break laws. There's international law.
Oh, yeah.
So
And they're unconstitutional. They're violation of Fourth Amendment rights, for example.
And the International Criminal Court has a few cases filed now for human rights abuses, and in Germany, I understand. And then there's one by the Red Cross that's been filed recently in Switzerland.
that's right, because the Red Cross is supposed to be able to get access to people who are being held, and the United States is refusing to let the Red Cross get access to find out the conditions. And then there's a federal law, the Anti-Torture Statute, the 1996 War Crimes Act, and besides all kinds of international law, the Hague Convention, the Geneva Accords, and all kinds of things that prohibit these kinds of things. So it's blatantly violating international law. And I think a lot of people don't know that international law treaties are, according to the Constitution, the highest law of the land. So the Constitution provides that when the United States ratifies a treaty, that becomes
U.S. law.
That's right. Very strong,
Absolutely.
Powerful U.S. law.
Right.
And here Bush is saying, and Cheney are saying now,
And they've drafted a bill to pardon themselves. I mean, they're working on a tribunal war bill to pardon themselves, retroactive to 9/11.
so before 9/11?
Yeah, it's
then, or
kind
after?
of hidden into this war tribunal that they're setting up,
Okay.
a new bill, and hidden in that is the ability to pardon himself.
Oh, well, that's convenient.
That's in the event that when President Bush and Richard Cheney are out of office, they spare themselves from any criminal indictment.
Right,
later
because
on.
that would be a separate process.
That's right.
The impeachment is to remove them from office.
That's right.
And the criminal charges for the crimes they've been doing are,
It'd be very difficult.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to indict a sitting president.
right. Yeah. Now, there's a third one that was about illegally spying on people here in the U.S., and one of you can talk about that, one or more.
One or more. I'll start with
Go
it.
ahead.
In a date I don't remember, our country set up a FISA law, and it enabled.
The FISA is Foreign Intelligence.
1978, that was.
Okay.
The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act.
I'll pick this up.
Okay.
And it was set up in such a way that the government could begin surveillance of people and retroactively get permission from this court. And as I understand it, the court had approved like 1,900 applications and rejected 5.
Yeah, so it's basically a rubber stamp.
Yes. And Bush began overriding it. I think one of the judges who was on the court resigned in indignation. And then he came out and said that court didn't have jurisdiction over him, or that law didn't have jurisdiction.
So even though this FISA court, this special court that allows retroactive, secretive spying on people, even though that's essentially a rubber stamp, Bush was even bypassing that rubber stamp
Right.
because he can.
Yes.
He gave himself the power to do it.
He's
Right.
declared himself an imperial president.
Right.
I mean, he's given himself king-like powers in a sense.
And one of the other things that's not mentioned is that with all the databases and all the collection of materials that's now available, it's like they're going through telephone company records, and who knows where, how deeply they can snoop into individuals' lives and have no accounting for it.
And it makes you think back to the Fifth Amendment that says that no person
Right.
will be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And this certainly is attacking our liberty
Right.
without due process of law. And that's the Constitution that says that.
That's right.
Right.
And you know, the other part is the right of people to be secure in their home, in their person's houses, papers, and effects.
Right. And the
Against
Constitution,
unreasonable searches.
yeah, the Constitution recognizes an inherent right of privacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, yeah, the spying on people's phone conversations came to light in May of 2006, and that was also without any approval by Congress, without any court approval. It's just he just did it because he could get away with it.
And even after it was discovered and he was confronted, he continued to say,
Yeah.
well, I can do it.
Yeah.
I'm the president. I
Yeah.
can do it.
Yeah, he doesn't need a law. He can just do it. And the whole idea of this country is that people created the government in a way that limits the government power. People have inherent rights, inalienable human rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and these are limited only by things that the law says the government can do this to curtail this or that or whatever. And he's turning that upside down and saying he can do anything unless there's a law against it, and even if there's a law against it, he can do it anyway.
Right.
Right.
And yet the courts have ruled, and there was a case that the ACLU brought regarding torture and rendition. I think it was the Hamdan case, where the federal judge ruled in that instance that he was breaking the law and that there are no hereditary kings in America and that he can't do that and get away with it.
Yeah, it was
so
a very
he's
strongly-
been declared that his actions are illegal.
It was a very strongly worded, surprisingly strongly worded
Yeah.
legal decision. I remember having seen that.
Yeah, the end of it says, so all inherent powers must derive from the Constitution.
That's right, right.
Judge Anna Diggs Taylor, and I think she was in Detroit.
Now, Talitha, you have a special concern about the fourth impeachable offense that your group is
Signing
working
statements.
with. Tell us about signing statements. I think people still don't know what's going on with that.
Well, it's kind of the most confusing because it's not really written in the Constitution. It's just been a tool that's been used in history for presidents to kind of make a comment on a bill that's been passed, and so it's been kind of like a press release. But this president used it in about 800 signing statements in more of a line item veto, which is the Supreme Court has ruled is unconstitutional, line item vetoes. And so the American Bar Association has said that's completely unconstitutional. They have created a task force to investigate the problem, and they concluded that the president has an obligation to follow the law once he signs it, that it becomes a law, and that.
So what the way that's gone then is Congress passes a law, and instead of very sparingly writing a signing statement, which presidents have done really very sparingly, where they're basically just commenting on something, he's actually said, I'll sign this law, but I'm adding this document to it, and this document says I don't really have to obey parts of the law if I don't want to.
Exactly.
So it's not just what other presidents have done, which is write a comment on it.
Right. It's kind of started a few presidents ago, getting worse. But he's been rewriting the law, sabotaging and destroying the meaning of the law.
Even though the Constitution says Congress writes the law, and he either signs it or vetoes it, or
That's right.
Exactly.
Constitutional scholars declare that activity, that behavior is illegal.
and you said the American Bar Association has jumped on this as
Yes,
well.
they've created a special task force to investigate this, and they've spoken at the government hearings on signing statements. And they've been given a few suggestions on how to correct the problem.
So, what was And something here I was going to come up with, and it's the parts of the Constitution. Article 1 says all legislative powers are granted shall be vested in the Congress of the United States, and so he's doing something that's not allowed by the Constitution because he's essentially rewriting the law to take out parts of it on his own authority, like you said, like a line item veto, which is not provided for in the Constitution. Then Article 2 says the President shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And from what you've said, the signing statements, he sometimes is saying, I just reserve the right not to obey the law, this law, parts of it. And then Article 3 of the Constitution says that the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as Congress may ordain and establish. So he's ignoring what the courts have said as well.
Yes, it's basically allowed him to get away with this war because he's hijacked America through signing statements, and Congress has not done its duty to challenge him and rein him in.
There's a case in 2005 where Congress passed another law about torture, saying we really are prohibiting torture, and Bush says, well, I can just disregard that too. That was one of his signing statements he did in relation to that 2005.
Right, they thought that it was settled, and then here they discovered there was a signing statement that nullified the law.
Yeah, which is not, I mean, if he wants to veto it, that's one thing. There's a veto process.
That's his duty, to veto it.
But and then Congress can override if they choose. But he's allowing the law to be passed and then just going on record as saying, I'm just going to ignore the law.
An interesting footnote to this issue is the fact that by some estimates we have as many as 75,000 persons in prisons in various places in the world, some of them children, and we've not brought any of them to trial.
That's right.
Although now that the government is being pushed to do that, federal prosecutors are, I saw an article in the paper just within the last week or so where 86% of cases that the government brings in regard to these particular individuals are being thrown out because there are no grounds for an accusation.
Yeah. So this stuff that we talked about, these abuses, the tortures and the lack of due process and stuff, we're seeing that evidence then that turns out they really don't have a case. And that violates the constitutional right to due process and a speedy trial.
That's right.
Because they're just holding these people for years without even bringing charges, never taking them to trial. You can just say, you're going to be in prison forever.
And of course, the way the law is written, they could do that to you or to me, or they could pick someone up off the street here and hold them indefinitely without notice to their family or without bringing them to court.
Yeah, or access to a lawyer or
That's
anything. So now, we had a case when Clinton was president a few years ago where there was an impeachment, and people might be thinking, gee, didn't we do this thing with Clinton? Could you comment on how you see that as a comparison?
Well, this is not an issue. This issue that we're confronting now with the Bush administration is not an issue concerned with a stain on a blue dress or fibbing about a consensual sexual matter. This is about violation of the Constitution.
Yeah, and repeatedly.
Repeatedly, right. This is about the shredding of our Bill of Rights, really.
Yes.
And that, I think, at the time when the Republicans were pushing this against Clinton, I think the public could see real clearly this is just partisan gamesmanship. They're just playing politics, and I think the public saw that, and I don't know of any public support, and I've got my ear to the ground a lot with people around the community and beyond, and I just never heard any public outcry saying, wow, we got to impeach Clinton for cheating on his wife.
Right.
You know,
that was a travesty.
That was, We had another case about 30 years before with Nixon and the Watergate scandal and the things that came to light as a result of that. Could we summarize? Some of the people might not remember what that was about. Could somebody summarize what some of those?
I at times have difficulty remembering myself, but certainly it was about a break-in and a robbery. It was about the commission of crimes and then trying to cover it up. And the president was intimately involved in the Watergate break-in to steal documents from a psychiatrist, I believe it was, who was
they did that as
working
well.
with Daniel Ellsberg. And so, right, there were clear crimes committed in that
Yeah.
instance.
And they were able to trace that back through actual documents and tape recordings
And money paid
stuff
to the burglars
that,
and all
yeah,
that. sort of-
that the
right.
Nixon and his top, very, very top people, John Mitchell, the Attorney General, and his top advisors, Haldeman, Ehrlichman, John Dean, his lawyer,
Right.
were all involved with paying people to commit actual felonies
Yes.
and using and laundering campaign money illegally and do all. I mean, these were real felonies.
That's right.
And the things that he was doing there were actually violating serious laws.
That's right.
And fraudulent things
And
around
of
the
course,
electoral
John Dean has, within the past few years, written a book entitled "Worse Than Nixon." It's in reference, of course, to
Right.
George Bush.
Yeah. So this comes up. The current thing seems to be at that level and above, because these current crimes are really targeting the Constitution itself.
And they're very blatant. They're not even done sub rosa. They're kind of done right out in front of everyone.
Yeah. So it's a blatant power grab.
Absolutely.
And it's just so un-American. Now, the way it works, you folks are all working for impeachment. And the way it works, as we said at the beginning of the program, is that Congress says, wow, we got to look into this. We got to see if there's evidence that the crimes have been committed and generate articles of impeachment and pass it to the Senate so they can do this. The House of Representatives has not been moving on this. I wonder if somebody could tell us, give us some information and some insights about that.
Well, part of my reason for joining with this movement is that even though we may not get Bush and Cheney impeached and convicted, I think we need to let our elected representatives know that they're not in the job for life, and that those of us who they represent have a say about their behaviors and what they choose to enforce or not enforce.
So you want to hold Congress accountable too?
Absolutely.
Okay. And that, again, is not partisan.
No.
It's just all of Congress.
Yeah, they're sworn to uphold the Constitution, and if the president is breaking it, that's part of their duty.
Congress must act. We must just gather forces and encourage people to speak out and put the pressure on them, because it's their job to protect the American citizens, and we're being attacked by our Constitution being lost, that we are losing our rights.
So what is Congress's excuse? What reasons are they giving for not acting?
Well, of course, up until this last election, the Ethics Committee, the Judiciary Committee were controlled by Republicans who wouldn't allow these issues to come to the fore. We expect now, with the change in the configuration of the House and Senate, that will be different, and that investigations will begin to proceed, and we hope that our officials will be held accountable.
What are they saying? What are the members of Congress saying about impeachment?
Well, they're saying it's off the table.
Well, Nancy
Pelosi,
Pelosi,
the new House Speaker says
Right.
it's off the table.
Right.
But she kind of has to, because if
Right.
the president goes and the vice president goes, according to the Constitution, the Speaker of the House is next in line.
look a little self-serving.
So it would look self-serving if
It
she were to
does.
push for it.
That's
But
right.
what about, we got 435 members of the House,
Well, see, I think
so she's one. What about the other 434?
That's where we come in, or by we, I mean we, the people. This is what's happening here in Olympia with our little group is happening across the country.
Right.
During the last election, the city of San Francisco voted 59% for impeachment. Urbana, Illinois voted for impeachment. There are communities across the country where citizens are standing up and saying, we're going to hold this government accountable for its behavior. So that's where we fit into this. I think even though the House is not inclined at this point to put this at the top of the list, it's up to we, the people, to push our representatives in Congress to tell them that we want this government held accountable.
Well, and that's the way all the reforms throughout our history have been. Women's right to vote, women started organizing very actively for that in the middle of the 1800s. And
Came from the people.
And it was 70 years of effort to get Congress to do it. It wasn't Congress's bright idea that says, we guys in the Congress are going to do you women a favor and let you vote. It was people agitating for, in this case, 70 years before they did it. And the environmental movement, Social Security, everything in this country comes from bottom-up movements.
That's right.
And then eventually Congress will realize they have to do the right thing.
That's right. And if enough of us get on board with this effort,
Yeah.
then we think Congress will come along eventually.
Yeah.
And one thing is it made us pay attention more. We realized that a lot of things have gained root in our country because we haven't been acting soon enough.
Yeah, well, somebody, in preparing for the program, we had conversations, and the question came up is like, it's not just what does Congress think about impeachment, but it's also what do the American people think about impeachment?
Right.
And that's where you're at right here.
Right.
And there have been public opinion polls showing openness and actual support.
That's great.
There's something where people said, the people were asked, if there's good evidence that Bush had indeed lied to get us into the war, would you support an impeachment? And there was a majority. There's
Yeah, that's right.
over 50%.
More, I think about 54%
Yeah,
the
something
last
more-
I had heard.
Yeah. So, there. You mentioned when we were talking about on the phone about how this plays in the rest of the world. About, well, like what we said before about American values, about human rights that we preach to other people.
But I think it's really important that the world sees that the citizens are standing up for what's right and human rights in general, because there's a lot of hatred in the world. I have a friend just coming back from South America, and she said that it's just everywhere. Everywhere, she went to a lot of different countries.
Is it your sense that if the American people pushed on Congress to do impeachment and Congress went ahead with impeachment, that might help straighten things out in world opinion?
No, I think that the people would feel that justice is being served. There's just so much anger. What's going on?
Let's see. We're covering a lot of stuff. There's a lot of good information here, and we're actually nailing down quite a lot of it.
I might say one other thing about Talitha's remark, that if you allow a president or an administration to blatantly violate the laws of the land and you give them a pass, what does that say about the future for this country and for a system that's existed for 230 years? It seems to me it says we're in deep trouble if we don't respond to obvious misdeeds.
Yeah. If these guys can get away with this, what will the next people get away with?
Absolutely.
Yes.
You know, and there's that slippery slope, and we're way down that slope
Right.
already because, as you've been saying, Congress has not been doing their job to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
And the American people have not risen up enough to vigorously
Right.
hold
And
Congress's
I've
feet to the
heard,
fire.
I've talked to Congressman Adam Smith, and he used some past things in history about why he didn't want to bring about impeachment, and that other presidents have done certain things, and he said he would back an investigation if it should take place, but he wouldn't initiate it. And I just found that real troubling that he cited some other deeds that have been done in history.
So it's like, well, everybody does it.
Right, right, and it's been done before. And
But not in this country. I don't see that it's ever been done on this scale
no,
and in so many ways.
That's right.
yes,
I know what I was looking for here. There is, when we talk about congressional attitudes and their sense about what does the public expect from Congress, Congressman John Conyers had introduced House Resolution 635 that called for investigating what Bush has been doing to see about possible impeachment. And Congressman Conyers there are 38 members of the House who in 2006 had signed on to that. In the election in November of 2006, one of those House members who had signed on to his resolution was elected to the Senate, and all of the other 37 who had signed on were reelected. So if if the Congress people are afraid, gee, maybe this is too far out and I'm going to risk my electoral future, the evidence from November 2006 was one person got elected to the Senate from the House, and all the other 37 people who had signed on in the House to Conyers' resolution got reelected, and some of those got reelected with bigger margins.
That's right.
So
Hopefully
Congress,
they will
it's a
be
safe,
emboldened a bit. We're hoping for that.
yeah.
Sure.
So it's not a risky thing at all, because my
Yes,
sense from
not
people I
now.
talk with is that people do believe that we should be upholding the Constitution and holding. I mean, look at how many politicians want to hold welfare mothers accountable, and they want to hold drug dealers accountable, and they always want to hold the other people accountable.
Right.
Powerless people they want to hold accountable.
Right.
And what about their own accountability?
Right.
You know, and what about the accountability of people in the White House?
Yes, exactly.
I think one of the things I find the most disturbing is that now that the election is over, Conyers has dropped the impeachment drum.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with
I
that.
don't
just
either.
Saw that recently.
Yeah, and in fact, I got an email today, on one of those mass emails, and it talked all about how great it was that he was back in Congress. It didn't say a word about impeachment, and yet prior to that, he'd have these long books of information. That
Oh yeah, there's a very long thing that
Yeah.
details a solid case with
yeah, what's
many, many, many hundreds of footnotes and solid information.
Yeah,
But they are not saying we won't hold hearings. They are talking about investigations. They are talking about subcommittees beginning to operate.
Some parts, and it may be that you need to do some of those things. But let's talk a bit about. Go ahead. You're going to say something.
Yeah, they also are talking about that if there's any more signing statements, that they would withhold funds.
Oh.
Any funds associated with a statement or a bill that
Okay.
has a signing statement, that they wouldn't release the funds for that.
Well, you folks are all involved with this local citizens movement to impeach Bush and Cheney. Tell us something about that. What is your organization's approach toward impeachment the kind of thing that we've been talking about here this evening? Is that the basic thrust of
Pretty much
what you're
like the
trying to do?
national movement.
yeah, and we have these 4 particular items because they came from a DVD put out by the Center for Constitutional Rights as the 4 most defensible articles that the president would be impeachable on.
Yeah, I've seen your that briefing booklet there. It's good, solid, informative stuff, and we've actually used some of that information in the program here. You folks started by watching a video, got together, and found out that people want to keep on getting together and do stuff. So it's one of
Right.
these really grassrootsy things.
Very,
Totally.
very much.
Just
I mean,
connected.
it was, I think, in July of this last summer. A group of us happened to wander into Traditions Cafe, and we watched this video together. And as a result of that, we decided that rather than feel hopeless about the circumstances in the government, that we would work together on this effort.
And you've been meeting every Monday night
Approximately every
during
Monday.
the fall, toward the end of the year here, and you started meeting at Traditions, and now you're at a different location.
We're meeting at the county courthouse,
Okay.
7 o'clock every Monday evening.
Okay, in that big meeting room. Is that
We
or
meet in one of the courtrooms. Whichever
okay.
one is
We're-
available.
You got a place to.
We're in Building 2, and we meet in courtrooms over there.
Oh, I see. Okay, good. Now you were getting some signatures during the late summer and fall, trying to generate public or gauge public interest. What did you find with the signature gathering, petitioning?
Well, we found that people were enthusiastic primarily, but some people, even military wives, would come up, and I have a husband or children over there. But we also found that some people were afraid to sign. That was very curious. They were afraid to put their name on something, that they would be on some kind of list, and we found that very telling.
We have an email address to reach your group, and then there's a website for a group that's got wonderful sorts of information. I want to put in a plug for those. Your group is, the email address for your group is impeachbush@riseup.net, and the website for, I think, the best source of information is www.afterdowningstreet.org, and that refers back to that Downing Street memo that, George, you were talking about. So www.afterdowningstreet.org, and then the email for your local group is impeachbush@riseup.net. So people can connect up in those ways. So you were getting signatures, and then on November 14, you went to the Olympia City Council because you wanted to get local governments involved. You had a strategy of connecting with
That's right.
local
Yeah.
governments. Tell us
We
about that.
decided that we would initially begin by going to local city councils, the Olympia City Council being the first group that we went to ask that they support and pass a resolution to prompt the House of Representatives to take action by initiating articles of impeachment.
Okay.
So when we did that, we were surprised that at that time they offered us use of the Washington Center for an evening.
Okay, that's the
To do a
Washington.
town hall meeting.
Washington Center for the Performing Arts.
Washington Center for the
Down on
Performing Arts.
Washington Street.
Right. Not to be confused with the Olympia Center.
Right.
So yeah, the big facility.
The big fancy
So
one.
we're intending now to, and we're working toward putting together a panel, a forum to occur on the 20th of February at the Washington Center, free to the public. We have a couple of people of national recognition who are coming to present at that forum.
Okay, can you release the names of who that is? I don't know how you are in the publicity process yet.
One is Elizabeth de la Viga. She's a federal prosecutor, retired, former, retired from 20 years of work, and she's written a book called United States versus George W. Bush. And she wrote it in a way that the reader is the grand jury.
So as a federal prosecutor, former federal prosecutor, she would be on that job developing evidence to present to a grand jury, and if the grand jury says, yeah, there's grounds here for filing charges, then it goes to an actual court. So she's
Right.
simulating that process in this case.
Yes.
Work she's done all of her life, and now
Yeah.
she's written a book and putting the Bush administration on trial.
And so she's
Exactly.
confirmed, and
She's
she
confirmed.
has solid data in that book, which is titled,
United States versus George W. Bush.
yeah, okay. And then there's a second person who's confirmed as of the date that we're taping the program.
David Lindorf.
And who
maybe
is
you'd like
he?
to talk more about him.
He's a two-time Fulbright scholar, author of a book entitled The Impeachment of George W. Bush, I believe is the title. He and Barbara Olshansky have written this book together. He's an accomplished musician as well as an author and political commentator.
So you have those two people confirmed, and then there are other people that they're working on as of the date that we're taping the program.
Right.
But your sense of this is that you've got that big facility, the Washington Center for the Performing Arts, which holds many hundreds of people.
1,000.
And what do you want to accomplish with this? What's your intent for that evening as it's developing?
Well, I think our main intent is to use this opportunity to put the word out, to educate the public, to get people involved, and to help folks understand that this is an important issue that concerns the fate of this country and the welfare of our future and our children's future.
And part of the title of this is you're calling it a town hall meeting.
Yes.
That's part of
Yes.
your title. And that seems to evoke this grassrootsy sense of we the people. You know, we're in charge of this country. It's we the people.
That's right.
Right.
And so you're hoping that people will come. I assume that it's okay for people outside of the area. We have people in other counties that we know, and I hope
We're gonna
people
try
get
We're
it.
going to put the word out.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we could fill it clear to standing room only, that would be great. And it holds 980 people, I
So
think.
that would be a way. It's a Tuesday night, which is when some of the city councils locally meet. But when I was talking with you folks on the phone to prepare for the program, you're hoping that you could get some elected officials of various kinds to come. So
We were in a little conflict with that because some of our Congress will not be in session at that time. So we thought that it'd be more important to go ahead with that date and try and get a few of our congressmen there.
okay, and this would be good for people who are not yet convinced or have questions or doubts or undecided or whatever. It's not just for people who already are well informed and committed.
We hope to reach out to unions and Republicans and all kinds of people to come and get educated and that it's about the Constitution. It's not about which party you're part of. It's critical.
So, yeah. And then you'll be needing volunteers to help get the word out or do various parts. I know you folks
We
have
have
been
all
working
kinds of
hard
duties.
on the planning. Pardon me?
We have all kinds of duties that
All
we
kinds
need
of
help
things.
with.
Yeah, so people can contact. They could email your group then.
Absolutely.
The
Yes.
email address that we gave, which I'll give again, and I want to make sure I get it right. It's impeachbush@riseup.net.
Right.
Yes.
Or they can call me. I don't mind
Okay,
putting my phone
give us
number out.
the number.
459-1079.
Okay, and they can connect, and you can.
Sure, they're welcome to call me and ask questions or
Great.
offer to help. We'd love to have more volunteers.
Okay, and there are sources of information that people can look at. Again, as I mentioned before, one of the best ones that I've seen, probably the best one I've seen, is www.afterdowningstreet.org, and they've got just all kinds of stuff there, all solid information and referrals and links to other sources. And then you had a briefing page, 4-page briefing paper that summarizes the 4 points, the 4 impeachable offenses that your group is specifically working with. Is there some way that you can be making that available for people to download or get?
Well, we have a website. It's Meetup. It's if they just type in.
Oh, I've got that written down because it's got a number with it, and I was afraid I'd forget the number. So you have www.impeachbush.meetup.com, and there's a /364,
Thank
and then maybe another / at the end.
And there's information on that about the points and
Okay.
the meetings, the schedules.
Okay, so that'll connect people with the group as well. So what would you like to have viewers do about this?
Get involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Democracy is not simply going to the polls once every couple of years. It's really participating in what's happening in your community and what's happening in your country.
Yeah.
It really is like if you don't do it, who will?
Yeah.
You know.
You know, I'd like people to recognize the gravity of doing nothing. You know, my wife and I have 4 children, we have 4 grandchildren, and if these things continue at the pace they're currently going, I hate to see what we are leaving for our children and our grandchildren. I think that as a parent and a grandparent to me would be the strongest tug. Get in there and protect your family.
Yes.
Can we offer a closing thought from each of you?
Well, I would just say again that I hope that viewers of this program think about coming to our meetings and consider joining up in this effort. We encourage participation and would be happy to have more folks come to our meetings.
Great, thank you, George.
And I would say if you're not outraged by what's going on, you're not paying attention, and if you think what you don't know won't hurt you, I say it is hurting you and it will continue to hurt you.
Okay, thanks, Talitha.
I think I gave my spiel already about children and grandchildren, but I would follow along with Talitha. What's going on is outrageous, and you know, it's like we've become a country of shoppers, and we need to become a country of citizens.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Well, Abraham Lincoln's not here for this program, but he said that it's all about government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and that's a value that I think we need to be holding on to. And before Lincoln, of course, the people, as we've said earlier, the people who founded the country wanted us to be able to protect freedom and democracy, and they had the Constitution to do it, and they built something into the Constitution so that when it starts to veer off course and people are doing things that are just blatantly illegal, high crimes and misdemeanors, and people violating their oaths of office, there is a system built in called impeachment, and so that really is the Constitution's way for us to get involved restore the freedom that we care about, to make sure that we're governed by laws and not by people's whims and abuse of power. So yeah, it really is everybody's responsibility to protect what we have and bring back what we've lost. So I want to thank George Hartwell and Talitha Thalia and Jerry Smith. We want to thank the folks who've been watching and encourage you to get involved with these folks and the other folks that are participating in this movement locally in the greater Olympia area and then elsewhere as well. For information, you can contact www.afterdowningstreet.org. You can email impeachbush@riseup.net, or you could phone George at
459-1079.
Great, thanks so much. For information about a variety of issues that relate to peace and social justice and nonviolence, you can contact the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation at 360-491-9093. You can visit our website, www.olyfor.org. We also like to have lots of people, lots of kinds of people participating. We do a lot of activities, and there's a place for everybody. We're all one human family. We all share one planet. We can make the world a better place, but we all have to do our part, and the world needs what you have to offer. Thanks.
Thank you.